Today, I'm sharing with you the two best habits for feminine vitality backed by science. Vital means essential, indispensable to the continuance of life, or full of energy, lively. For us to be full of energy, we have to quit self abandoning. And I challenge you to leave what you know at the door if the word God or even manifestation makes you uncomfortable, because God created science. I'm excited to share with you how it is that they merge. So in this video, we're going to go over the two techniques that are backed by science, that being our vibration as human beings and therefore our energy and our vitality, and fasting and praying. What the benefits of fasting are, how we can stop being gluttonous with our vice and instead turn it into a virtue of pursuing a spiritual life over that of the flesh, which only leads us to serve God even more. Welcome to Devoted to Extraordinary, where today is the first, last, only, and best day of your life. As you know, please subscribe if you want to continue being on this journey of femininity, having more virtue, and increasing your vitality together. And subscribe to the Substack, where I let you know through a weekly newsletter everything I'm talking about here on YouTube. I want to remind you of that distinction between the voice of the flesh or the devil being that enervating, that loss of energy, and the voice of God or the voice of the Spirit being that increased energy, that vitality, that is life versus death. So, what we're prioritizing here with vitality is energy. Fasting from fleshly desires that dull your spirit is the number one. Fasting and praying. That is only mentioned one time in the Bible. That is Matthew 17:21, and it has been removed from a few newer versions of the Bible. I like the King James Version, and it says, "Howbeit this kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting." The context of this verse is incredible because Jesus is telling his disciples that they were not able to expel a demon out of a boy because this kind comes out only through prayer and fasting, not faith alone, not prayer alone, but also choosing to pursue the Spirit actively and denying the flesh actively. We actually rely on food in so many ways. We depend on those 3 meals a day or on snacks continuously throughout the day. It might be a habit. You might not even be hungry, but your fingers are already going for the fridge. To be a virtuous woman, we want to deny vice, and the vice of gluttony is very big here. It's not just food that we intake, it is consumption generally speaking. This is social media, this is overworking, people pleasing, anywhere that our emotions are imbalanced or that we depend on something external for validation, that we have emotional crutches or ways to distract ourselves rather than knowing that we have the capacity through God, if nothing else, to face what we want to dissociate from. So instead of numbing your soul's hunger, give yourself food for the soul. And food is not the only thing that grants us energy, it's also the word of God, the Bible says. That is what fasting attempts to do here. When we lighten up quite physically, when we stop eating, we're less dense, we're less flesh, and we're more spirit. I'll show you this emotional vibration chart that I made. What is closer to God is faster vibration, and what is closer to the devil is a slower frequency and a slower vibration. So where the devil has those emotions of survival, such as stress or shame or suffering or victimization or pain or loss, it all creates contraction in the body. What creates expansion is the Lord. It is the emotions that are alive, like freedom, love, bliss, joy, peace, appreciation, gratitude, all of these incredible feelings that we can create more often, no matter what our circumstances are, when we surrender and rest in God's presence. By no means am I saying good vibes only, as they tend to say. It's not about canceling out the bad emotions or labeling them as bad for that matter. All emotions are so important to be embraced and digested, accepted rather than fought with. When we feel shame or guilt, we want to be able to notice and acknowledge that without shunning it. And that is what prayer and fasting allows us to do. We're able to state our worries and come to God and ask Him to show us why we feel that way. It's only when we get to the bottom of what is hurting us or what is irking us. When I'm able to confess what I feel through prayer, it immediately lifts. All of these lower frequency and slower vibration emotions are wanting to be risen. They're wanting to become a higher frequency and a faster vibration. Emotions are simply energy in motion. So, what we're witnessing as feeling is simply at its scientific core energy in motion. And this is the power of prayer. And this is the importance of saying how you feel out loud, because the chances are that you don't do that with anybody. If you aren't the type of person to call up a friend and tell them about what stressed you out today, if you don't have a confidant, and if you don't usually pray to God, you're most likely suppressing emotions, which only lead to illness, according to German New Medicine. So, how to do this? When you feel an overwhelming feeling, say, God, I feel very overwhelmed right now. What happened today really stressed me out, and I feel this weight on my shoulders. Please, can you take it away from me? And that may lead to more emotions. You may cry, but 2 minutes later, very, very soon after, sooner than we think, it will be gone. God will have taken that weight from you. That is what God means in Matthew 11:28, where He says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." For those of you who don't know, yoke is the big wooden plank that used to be set over the necks of two oxen so that they could walk together and plow the field. We don't use those anymore, but the word yoke sounds a bit like an egg yolk and you might have been confused. This is what I meant earlier when I talked about obedience. When I know that God's yoke is easy and His burden is light, it means that His will for me is going to lighten my load no matter what. He wants me to come to Him. He wants me to depend on Him and to confess how I feel. That's what prayer will do. So I challenge you to do that, or if you pray in any other kind of way, try speaking out loud. That is really it. You have to hear what you're saying so you can validate how you're feeling. As for fasting, what do you run to when you're stressed? If it's scrolling or gossiping or watching TV, whatever it is, identify it so you can do less of it or stop entirely. You want to commit to a fast in which you don't do it at all for a period of time. See how you're feeling and go from there. But try this. And then when you have those moments of craving for food, pray instead. Fasting is not a hunger strike or a diet. How you're doing this matters more than what you're doing. So if you think you're going to go hungry, if you choose all the stipulations I did, do something different, but allow yourself to go without what you usually do so you don't have that as a crutch anymore. You're simply abstaining entirely from certain foods, and some people simply drink only water for a few days. A word of warning: if you're pregnant or if you're taking medication, if you have any form of struggle with food, then please don't take my advice on fasting and do what the Holy Spirit leads you to do. I did the Daniel fast for 21 days alongside my church from the 6th of January to the 27th, and it was the most incredible experience I've ever had in terms of self control. I developed so much temperance by saying no thank you when somebody was having a cake or a hot chocolate, which I used to have daily, or chocolate at all. There was no caffeine involved, no meats, no dairy, no animal products really, no sweeteners, no processed foods, no solid fats. The way that it worked for me, a few days in, I realized I really needed a little bit more protein, and I included eggs back into my diet. And I also always had honey, or if I needed a mid afternoon boost, I would eat dates. So those were like my sweet cravings. For 21 days, what that looked like for me was cooking with olive oil instead of butter, no buying snacks or eating out or going to a cafe as I usually would. Before 12 p.m., I ate fruit or drank a smoothie, and I realized how that was very sustainable and I didn't feel too hungry before lunchtime. At lunch, I'd have a salad, and then at dinner, I'd have a light vegetable meal. This allowed for what they call the 16-8, basically go 16 hours without eating food and 8 hours eating food. So when they say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, it's not entirely true. What it says is break the fast. That's the word. I want to keep the fast going. So, what this entails is really just eating less, depending less on what goes into our mouths and more on what goes into our minds. It really is a mental challenge more than anything. It's about not snacking and therefore allowing the stomach to digest your last meal and then giving it room before it has to digest another meal. This is so the nutrients in our meals can be absorbed even more. When you eat, insulin is secreted by the pancreas to move sugar into the cells. We store the bulk of our sugar in our liver and skeletal muscle, but when we exceed those storage sites, we gain fat. So when we fast, our insulin levels are low and we tap into those fat stores for energy. So this is called autophagy, when the cells stop consuming the carbohydrates and the sugars and they turn to the stores of those fats. It's basically spring cleaning for the cells. So there's two types of people, the sugar burners and the fat burners. If you are a sugar burner, you're most likely a little bit overweight, you're a carbohydrate consumer, your primary fuel source for your cells is glucose, and that is insufficient. Therefore, you're always craving food. You can sometimes be hangry and have significant drops in your energy levels after that fuel source of sugar is gone. You might struggle a lot more with fat loss and weight generally. The cells of the fat burners will be consuming fat, therefore, it's easier for you to lose weight. You also have sustained energy levels, and that leads to more balanced emotions too, so you don't get hangry as often. You're also more clear cognitively, you sleep better, and you age more slowly. So it's a practice of longevity. Spiritual strength is the main purpose. This is not about fat loss as much as it is about God gain. When you give up your dependence on food or Instagram, scrolling, things like that, suddenly you have so much more self control over every other single area of your life because you have increased your self trust and your self reliance that you can do what you set out to do, and there are no crutches that might be draining your energy on the side. You remain more vital and whole and in integrity. I have yet to do a fast that is no food at all, but I was relatively hungry after 21 days of eating in this vegan style. I also wasn't allowed bread, so there were very limited carbohydrates. I could feel that I was more energetic. The hunger pangs that I was feeling led to me pursuing God even more. So make that be a reminder every time you feel hungry, crave the food for your soul. Hunger pangs come from when your cells are still seeking that external source of fuel in food, and they're switching slowly to the internal source of fuel through your fat. As long as you keep pursuing God and you keep praying in those moments, you will be able to move past those hunger pangs and they'll actually disappear as you adapt to a different form of fuel intake for your cells. So, once we have our personal area of prayer and fasting in communion with God, it's also important to root yourself in a routine and have habits with others who are also choosing the best for their spiritual well being. If you struggle with people pleasing and are always craving external validation, you need this more than anybody else. Toxic friendships and relationships exist if we give them our energy. Quit the gossip and quit having low standards. Quit serving the devil. Go after the service of God by pursuing what gives you energy. Be surrounded by women who uplift you and hold you accountable, and actually have a calendar filled with events surrounded by these types of women. As they say, you become most like the 5 people you spend the most time with. You are what you do. Instead of surrounding yourself with people who are validating your insecurities, start being in places that elevate your standards because they are leading a life that you want to lead too. Start being inspired by the women who are around you. Seek places that have women who are doing things that you want to be doing. Start shaping your own environment because that is what creates the influences into your mind and body and heart and your soul and your spirit. I sought out friends who were asking the questions that I was asking about God and how to be closer to Him instead of simply going out and partying every single night. I sought the beauty in life and I sought to be extraordinary. Unless you choose to have that devotion, you will not gain it. You cannot expect a miracle where you have not placed your entire faith Pray for women in your life who are one step ahead of where you are. If they have a successful marriage, if they're a wonderful mother, if you want those things, go and learn from them. Ask for their advice, and you will learn so much faster than if you simply Google it or ask ChatGPT about it. Be intentional about your community, not because it's going to serve you. Ask yourself, how can I serve them? How can I be an integral part of this circle? Have a sisterhood, build one, set your own standards, make your own YouTube channel, do something where you can shine and your values are held up for everybody to see. So not only are you praying for sisters and looking for them, but they're looking for you too and finding you. That is what fasting and praying does best about this community. You get to choose to spend less energy on what drains you, on toxicity, on low standards, and you get to choose to be in community with those who uplift you, who involve you in growing into a better spirit led self. We are in this world, but not of it. Rather than pursuing the culture and the flesh that we have today, be surrounded by women who are also leading you closer to God with their influence. Quit the cycles of self doubt. Maybe give yourself a fast from those types of friendships or relationships for 3 days and see how you feel. Comment below, I'd love to hear it. Let me remind you, this is all about your intention. If you're going into a fast with self denial, it's never going to work. But what it will ultimately do if you go into a fast with an intention to get closer to God is you will have so much more of a truer radiance about you. You'll be able to eat those foods again. When I had chocolate, it tasted so much richer than I ever remembered it tasting. When I had cheese, it was so much yummier than I ever recalled. I was more grateful for it. You'll be able to be lighter and clearer and more confident because you'll have developed that trust with yourself and God. You'll have a greater joy and fulfillment because you won't be pursuing the next hit of dopamine. You'll know that your contentment is deeper than that. It's not as simple as a temporary comfort or an external validation. It's internal and it's always there. You can turn to it whenever you need. These two habits of prayer and fasting and seeking a better community are really what you need to put your entire intention and focus on to have that deeper spirit and that deeper resilience on being rather than doing all the time. You'll be able to rest in the magic of surrender, especially being a feminine woman. Please subscribe to the Substack if you'd like to hear from me on the newsletter. And until next week, as my grandma always said, harden not your hearts, love and serve each other.